"This is incredible," Uzi whispered, running her fingers through the new hair. It felt strange but looked amazing. "This is a special serum. Apply it to your hair every night before bed." The hair slithered up the bedpost like a serpent. It moved toward Wasiu's face, hovering just above him. As if sensing something, Wasiu opened his eyes. She walked to Wasiu's room and knocked on the door, but there was no response. A sense of unease crept over her as she slowly pushed the door open. What she saw inside made her eyes widen in shock. As Uzi opened the door, her eyes went straight to the bed, but Wasiu was not there. Where has he gone? She wondered, feeling a strange chill in the room. She decided to step inside and was suddenly met with a sight that froze her in place. Wasiu's lifeless body was lying on the ground. Her heart pounded wildly. She wanted to scream, but quickly covered her mouth with her hand. What happened to him? Is he really dead? She wondered aloud, her mind racing with fear. She dropped to her knees, shaking him desperately. Wasiu, please wake up. But there was no response. She checked his pulse, praying for any sign of life, but still nothing. Wasiu was gone. Panic set in. If Wasiu is truly dead, who would believe that I found him like this? Uzi thought, her mind spinning with fear and confusion. But then she had to act quickly. She picked up her handbag, dashed into the guest room, hurriedly arranged the room as if no one ever entered it, grabbed the nightwear Wasiu had given her, stuffed it into her bag. With one last look around, Uzi ran out of the house, making sure no one saw her. She flagged down a cab and jumped in. As Uzi sat in the cab, her heart pounded loudly in her chest. She couldn't stop thinking about what she had seen. Wasiu, lying there on the floor, lifeless. It didn't make sense. They had just been talking and laughing a few hours ago. How could he be dead now? Her thoughts raced. Did someone come into the house while they were sleeping? Could Wasiu have done this to himself? She couldn't find any answers, only more questions. She remembered hearing a scream, but she had thought it was just in her dream. Now, she wasn't so sure. The more she thought about it, the more frightened she became. Could it have been real? She wondered, her fear growing with every passing moment. But what Uzi didn't know was that something truly strange had happened while she was asleep. Her hair had mysteriously crept away from her head, slithered into Wasiu's room, silently slithered towards him, and struck him in the neck. It had drained his life out of him, mysteriously taking in his blood until there was nothing left. Before I continue the story, this is a plea to you, my amazing viewers who are yet to subscribe, to please be a part of my growth by subscribing. You can check out the description box or the icon above to see the first part of the story. To you, my returning subscribers, thank you so much. Now, grab your popcorns as this story is about to make you say, wow. When Uzi finally reached her apartment, she quickly paid the driver and ran inside her house, locking the door behind her. She leaned against the door, trying to catch her breath. Her hands were trembling as she dropped her bag on the floor. She knew she needed to calm down and think clearly, but how could she when everything was so confusing? She rushed to the bathroom to splash cold water on her face. As she looked up into the mirror, she noticed something strange. Her hair looked different, darker, thicker, and almost alive, just as if she had used the serum. For a moment, it seemed as if the hair was moving on its own, but Uzi blinked hard, thinking her mind was playing tricks on her. But when she looked again, everything was still. Kai, I need some rest, she said to herself as she laid on the bed and dozed off. The weekend was over and Rock Media was buzzing with activity. Mrs. Wallen, one of the directors, was going through some files on her desk when someone knocked on her door. Come in, she said without looking up. Ajibade, Wasiu's colleague, stepped into the room.
Good morning, ma.
He greeted, his voice tense. Good morning, Ajibade. What is it? Mrs. Wallen asked, noticing the worried look on his face.
Ma, Wasiu has not resumed work today, and he hasn't been picking his phone since Saturday.
Mrs. Wallen frowned. That's strange. Why Wasiu is always punctual. Did he mention anything about being sick or taking leave?
No, ma.
Ajibade replied, shaking his head.
He didn't say anything. With your permission, ma, can I quickly get down to his house to check up on him? He lives around the corner.
Mrs. Rowland hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Okay, Ajibade, make sure to be quick and let me know what you find out.
Yes, ma, I will. Thank you.
Ajibade said, rushing out of the office. As Ajibade drove quickly down the street, his mind raced. Wasiu had always been a good friend and colleague. The fact that no one had heard from him all weekend made Ajibade uneasy. Something didn't feel right. When Ajibade finally reached Wasiu's house, he noticed that the curtains were drawn and the house seemed unusually quiet. He knocked on the door, but there was no answer. He knocked again, louder this time, and called out Wasiu's name. Still, no response. Ajibade felt a growing sense of dread. He tried the door handle and to his surprise it was unlocked. He pushed the door open slowly and stepped inside. The house was eerily silent and a strange smell lingered in the air. He called out Wasiu's name again. Still no response. As he moved further into the house, Ajibade noticed that the living room was untouched. Everything was in its place, but something about the atmosphere was unsettling. Then he entered into Wasiu's room. The sight that greeted him made his blood run cold. Wasiu was lying on the floor, motionless. His skin was pale and there was no sign of life in his eyes. Ajibade's legs nearly gave way as he rushed to his friend's side.
Wasiu! Wasiu!
Ajibade shook him vigorously, but there was no response. He checked for a pulse, but there was none. Wasiu was dead. Ajibade stumbled back, his mind reeling.
How could this have happened? Wasiu was fine just a few days ago. What could have happened to this young man?
As Ajibade stood there, trying to make sense of the situation, he noticed something strange. Wasiu's neck had two small dark marks on it, almost like tiny puncture wounds, and around those marks, the skin looked bruised, as if something had gripped him tightly. Ajibade felt a chill run down his spine. This didn't look like a natural death. Something or someone had attacked Wasiu. The big question now is, who and why? The news of Wasiu's death spread through rock media like wildfire. Everyone was talking about it, and as expected, it became a hot dish for the gossip mongers. I heard Wasiu was so dirty that he never cleaned his house. One of the office assistants, Kemi, whispered to a colleague as they gathered in the break room.
No wonder a snake got into his house and bit him. Can you imagine?
That's true.
Another lady chimed in. He was always leaving food out and his trash was always full. It's no wonder something like this happened to him. I even heard that the snake was hiding under his bed. As the gossip spread, Uzi overheard bits and pieces of the conversation. Her heart raced for a moment, but then she felt a wave of relief wash over her. So it was a snake that had killed Wasiu. She shrugged at the thought, feeling grateful. Thank God, the snake didn't harm me. Uzi thought to herself. She shuddered at the memory of that strange night, but quickly pushed it aside. She was safe, and that was all that mattered. A few weeks after Wasiu's death, everyone at Rock Media seemed to move on as if nothing had ever happened. The office was back to its usual buzz, with people chatting, laughing, and going about their daily routines. Wasiu's name was rarely mentioned, and life moved on. One evening, Uzi was still at the office, long after most of her co-workers had left. She had finished her work, but instead of rushing home, she stayed back, pressing her phone. There was no point in battling the crazy traffic she had seen through the office window. She didn't want to get stuck in it. Meanwhile, Bimpe, a lively presenter who worked at Rock Media, had just finished her show and was heading home. As she walked down the hallway, she noticed that Uzi's office door was still open. Curious, she peeked inside and saw Uzi sitting at her desk, engrossed in her phone. Uzi, what are you still doing here? Bimpe asked, stepping into the office. Uzi looked up, a bit startled. Oh, Bimpe, I'm just waiting for the traffic to ease up. No point in stressing myself when I can just stay here for a while. Bimpe nodded in understanding. Lagos traffic will humble anybody. But you know what? Why don't you come crash at my place tonight? I live close by, and you can leave early tomorrow morning when the roads are clear. Uzi hesitated for a moment. She wasn't sure if she should accept the offer after everything that had happened. She had become more cautious about where she went and who she spent time with. "Are you sure it's okay?" Uzi asked. "Of course, no problems at all," Bimpe replied with a bright smile. "Let's go. We can even stop for suya on the way." Uzi finally agreed and the two ladies left the office together. As they drove through the city, they talked and laughed about the never-ending Lagos traffic. Uzi felt at ease, the tension of the past few weeks slowly melting away as Bimpe's cheerful energy filled the car. For a while, everything felt normal, and Uzi allowed herself to relax, enjoying the company and the moment. When they arrived at Bimpe's house, the two ladies continued their chatter, their laughter filling the cozy apartment. Uzi felt a sense of warmth and comfort she hadn't experienced in a long time. She was so happy she had accepted Bimpe's invitation. "It's really nothing," Bimpe said, brushing off Uzi's gratitude as she made tea for both of them. "You would do the same for me, wouldn't you?" Uzi smiled and nodded. She hadn't always been close to Bimpe, but tonight she felt like she had found a true friend. The thought of the long, lonely night she would have spent at the office made her even more thankful for Bimpe's kindness. When it was finally time for bed, Bimpe showed Uzi to her small but tidy bedroom. "You can take the bed," Bimpe offered, fluffing the pillows. "I'll sleep on the cushion in the living room." Uzi immediately objected. "No, I can't let you do that. This is your bed. I'll be fine on the couch." But Bimpe just laughed, grabbing her pillow and blanket. "Nonsense. You're my guest and I insist. Plus, that couch is surprisingly comfortable." She winked and left the room, leaving Uzi alone. Uzi felt a deep sense of gratitude as she sat on the bed. She had always known Bimpe as a colleague, but tonight had shown her another side, kind, generous, and caring. As she got ready for bed, Uzi's thoughts drifted back to the serum she used on her hair. She had been so worried about it before, but now she waved it off. "It's just hair," she whispered to herself, smiling. "It will take care of itself." With that, she snuggled under the covers and drifted off to sleep. In the middle of the night, the apartment was quiet. The only sound was the soft hum of the refrigerator. But in Uzi's bedroom, something was stirring. Her hair began to grow, lengthening into long, slender tendrils. The strands moved with a life of their own, slithering silently across the bed, down the side and onto the floor. The tendrils glided out of the room, silent and deadly. They crept into the living room where Bimpe lay fast asleep on the cushion, completely unaware of the danger approaching. The hair hovered over her for a moment, almost as if it was thinking, before striking swiftly. Bimpe's eyes flew open, but she couldn't scream. The hair squeezed the life out of her, draining her energy, her essence, her very life. Within moments, Bimpe's body went limp, her eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. The tendrils released their grip, retracting back to the bedroom and curled back onto Uzi's head as if nothing had happened. The next morning, Uzi woke up feeling refreshed. She stretched and yawned, feeling more relaxed than she had in weeks. She quickly got dressed, ready to face the day. "Bimpe!" she called out as she stepped out of the bedroom, expecting to find her friend in the kitchen or the bathroom. But there was no response. Uzi shrugged, figuring Bimpe was still asleep. "Lazy bones," Uzi muttered with a chuckle, not wanting to disturb her sleep. She grabbed a piece of paper from Bimpe's table and wrote a quick note thanking her for the hospitality and promising to return the favor soon. She placed the note where Bimpe would see it and left the house, closing the door behind her. As Uzi walked out into the fresh morning air, she felt a strange sense of calm. Little did she know what awaited her. That same afternoon, after Uzi had finished her work for the day, she decided to check up on her new friend Bimpe. But when Uzi arrived at Bimpe's office, her heart sank. Bimpe hadn't come to work. Fear gripped Uzi, her heart pounding in her chest. "God, please, let it not be what I am thinking," she whispered to herself, trying to push away the terrible thoughts creeping into her mind. She rushed back to her own office, grabbed her phone and quickly dialed Bimpe's number. The phone rang and rang, but there was no answer. "Ha! What is it again? Uzi mumbled, pacing back and forth in her office, her anxiety growing with each unanswered ring. Something was wrong. She could feel it in her bones. Without wasting another moment, Uzi grabbed her keys and rushed to her car. She drove straight to Bimpe's house, her mind racing with worry. When she got there, she noticed the door was locked. She knocked on the door, her heart pounding louder with each knock, but there was no response. "Bimpe!" she called out, hoping to hear her friend's voice from inside, but the house was silent. Just then, a woman walked by and Uzi, desperate for answers, rushed to her. Excuse me ma, please, have you seen Bimpe? The lady who lives here." The woman stopped and looked at Uzi with a somber expression.
You mean Auntie B?
Uzi nodded, her heart thudding in her chest. "Yes, Auntie Bimpe. Did you see her, or have you seen her?" The woman sighed heavily, shaking her head.
She cried this morning, no.
The woman said, shaking her head sadly.
Her baba been come here this morning, they shout. Now so people gather, oh. We begin ask question. Now so we see say Auntie B don't buy. Then say a snake bite am.
Jesus! Uzi screamed, stumbling backwards, her entire body trembling. Her vision blurred as tears welled up in her eyes. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Bimpe dead? And by a snake bite? Just like Wasiu? This is not just a coincidence. Uzi ran back to her car. Her hands trembled so much that she fumbled with the keys before finally starting the engine. She needed to get out of there, away from the suffocating reality that was closing in on her. Her mind was in turmoil, racing with 1,000 questions and fear. How could this be happening again? First Wasiu, and now Bimpe. And both of them died after she had spent the night in their house. Uzi gripped the steering wheel tight as she drove faster, trying to escape the terrifying thoughts chasing her. But no matter how far or how fast she drove, the fear followed her. Something was terribly wrong, and she knew she had to do something. As soon as Uzi got home, she immediately called her mother. Her hands were shaking as she dialed the number, and the moment her mother's voice came through, Uzi broke down in tears. "Mama, I don't know what is wrong with me." Uzi sobbed into the phone. She poured out everything that had been happening to her. The strange deaths, the nightmares, and the eerie feeling that something was terribly wrong. Her mother listened in stunned silence, only interrupting with occasional murmurs of concern. When Uzi finally paused to catch her breath, her mother's voice came through, filled with urgency. "Ha, my pikin, this matter strong past you. We are begin come village now like this." Uzi could hear the worry in her mother's voice, and it only heightened her own fear. "Mama, I am scared," she whispered. "Just come home, Uzi. We go find solution," her mama assured her. After ending the call, Uzi wasted no time. She quickly threw a few belongings into a bag, not caring about what she packed. All she knew was that she needed to get out of Lagos as fast as possible. The drive to her village was about 2 hours, but with the way her heart was pounding, it felt like a lifetime. When she finally pulled up in front of her mother's house, it was well past sunset. As Uzi stepped out of the car, her mother, who had been waiting anxiously by the door, rushed out to meet her. "Uzi, now you be this?" her mother exclaimed, staring at her daughter in shock. She barely recognized Uzi, especially with the artificial hair she had never seen her daughter wear before. "Yes, Mama. Now me," Uzi replied, her voice breaking as tears streamed down her face. She ran into her mother's arms, feeling a sense of safety she hadn't felt in weeks. "Come inside," her mother said gently, guiding Uzi into the house. Once inside, Uzi sat down and recounted everything to her mother. Every strange detail, every terrifying moment. Her mother listened carefully, her expression growing more serious with each passing minute. "Uzi, this one don't pass ordinary," her mother said solemnly after Uzi finished speaking. "This na spiritual matter. You go freshen up, chop small, then go rest. Tomorrow, I go carry you go meet our pastor. He go know wetin to do." Uzi nodded, but she was still scared. "Mama, please don't sleep here tonight," she pleaded. "I don't want anything to happen to you." Her mother hesitated at first, but the fear in Uzi's eyes made her reconsider. "Okay, my pikin, I go sleep for church this night," she said finally, her heart heavy with sorrow. "But nothing will happen to you, Uzi. God be with you, yeah? After preparing a meal for Uzi, her mother gathered a few of her things and left the compound, heading towards the church. Uzi watched her mother leave, feeling a pang of guilt for pushing her away, but she knew it was for the best. That night, Uzi was too devastated to care about her appearance. She barely noticed her hair or the fact that she hadn't applied the serum. Exhausted and emotionally drained, she collapsed onto the bed, falling asleep almost immediately. But as the night wore on, something sinister began to stir. Her hair, which had been lying still, suddenly started to move. It grew longer, thickening into dark writhing tendrils. The hair slithered off the bed, snaking its way out of the room and into the compound. At first, it moved silently, searching, hunting, but when it didn't sense any human, it rose up, spreading its tendrils wide, letting out a low guttural roar that echoed through the night like the call of a wild beast. It turned its attention to the chicken coop. The tendrils wrapped around the chickens, strangling them one by one. The hair seemed to pulse with energy as it drained the blood from the birds, feeding on their life source, but it wasn't satisfied. The hair slithered further, heading towards the goat house. There, it did the same thing, strangling the goats and draining them dry. The animals' eyes bulged in terror, but their struggles were futile against the monstrous force that had invaded the compound. The next morning, Uzi's mother returned from the church, humming softly to herself as she walked into the compound. She decided to go to the backyard first to release the goats as she did every morning. But as she approached the pen, her heart skipped a beat. All 3 goats were lying on the ground, completely still. Maybe then they sleep, she muttered, trying to convince herself as she knelt beside the goats and began to shake them vigorously. But there was no response. With a growing sense of dread, she ran towards the chicken coop, hoping against hope that her chickens were safe. But when she got there, the coop was eerily silent. All the birds were gone. A loud, heart-wrenching cry escaped her lips, echoing through the compound. Uzi, who had been resting inside, got up from the bed, her heart pounding as she ran outside. The sight of her mother kneeling among the dead animals brought tears to her eyes. But it wasn't just the loss of the livestock that made her cry. It was the realization that it could have been her mother lying there, lifeless. The thought made her stomach churn. It finally dawned on her that she was dealing with something far more sinister than she could have imagined. But what Uzi didn't know was that the hair on her head was a blood-sucking demon. The serum she had been using was processed blood, and without it, the hair sought out blood on its own. She fell to her knees beside her mother, tears streaming down her face. "Mama, it could have been you," she sobbed. "What is happening to me? Please, Mama, help me." Her mother, in tears, pulled Uzi close. "My pikin, this one no be ordinary problem. True, you get serious wahala. Go inside, go change. We dey go see our pastor now. She quickly changed her clothes and then, hand in hand with her mother, they ran out of the house. It was as if Uzi forgot she even had a car. The fear had consumed her so completely that all she could think about was getting help. When they reached the pastor's house, they were asked to wait for him outside. Moments later, Pastor Bao finally came out to meet them. His countenance immediately changed on seeing Uzi. He could sense that something was terribly wrong. Without saying a word to them, he began to pray. The air grew heavy as the pastor's voice rang out in the stillness of the morning.
I see a blood-sucking demon here. Reveal yourself.
The pastor commanded, his voice filled with authority. Uzi and her mother exchanged wary glances, not knowing who the pastor was referring to. But as the pastor continued to pray, 2 other prayer warriors joined him, and the intensity in the atmosphere increased. Suddenly, Uzi began to behave strangely. Her body twitched uncontrollably, and before anyone could react, her hair transformed into a writhing mass of snakes. Uzi's eyes glowed eerily, and she began to speak in a strange guttural voice that sent chills down her mother's spine. Terrified, Mama quickly ran away from her now demon-possessed daughter and hid behind the pastor. The snakes that were once Uzi's hair hissed and projected themselves forward, attempting to strike. I need blood! Blood! Uzi's voice growled, her body shaking violently. The pastors maintained a safe distance from the demon, their voices never faltering as they prayed with increasing fervor. Uzi's body convulsed as the prayers intensified. And finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the snakes retracted back into her scalp and Uzi collapsed to the ground, unconscious. Bring me scissors and razor blade, the pastor instructed the other men. They quickly complied, and with steady hands, the pastor began to cut off Uzi's hair, now devoid of its demonic power. He loosened her natural hair and even shaved her head completely, leaving her bald. The pastor gathered the hair, carried it outside and set it ablaze. As the flames consumed the hair, it writhed and twisted, hissing like a snake until it was completely burnt to ashes. When Uzi eventually regained consciousness, she was lying on a bed inside the pastor's house. Her body felt lighter, but a sense of dread lingered in her heart. She reached up to touch her head and froze when she realized she was bald. A loud, anguished cry escaped her lips. Her mother, who had been sitting by her side, quickly wrapped her arms around Uzi, trying to comfort her. My daughter, e good as we cut am o. Na that hair be the winch wey been dey trouble you. E been dey feed on your life. Tears streamed down Uzi's face as her mother recounted everything that had happened. The horror of it all left Uzi speechless. She knew her life had changed forever. The pastor, standing in the doorway, spoke gently to Uzi. You must get rid of everything that connects you to the spirit world. Here are some Bible verses to help you find strength and protection. You must stay strong and trust in God. Uzi and her mother thanked the pastor profusely. As they walked back home, people in the village pointed and laughed at Uzi's bald head. But she didn't care. After what she had been through, their laughter was nothing. She had faced darkness and survived. When she got home, the first thing Uzi did was to search the internet for the velvet strands, but to her horror, there was no sign of it. It was as if it had never existed. The calls, the bank notifications she received after paying for the hair, all had vanished. It was as if nothing had ever happened. Uzi checked for the serum, but it too was gone, leaving no trace. She realized then that she had indeed been dining with evil. Determined to rid herself of any remnant of the evil hair, Uzi gathered her shower cap, her bonnet, combs, everything she had used on her hair, and took them outside. She lit a fire and watched in tears as they all burnt, the flames consuming every last piece. A few days later, Uzi drove back to the city. She knew she had lost her job, her friends, and much more, but she didn't care. She's a survivor. No one could ever push her into something she would regret again. Life will be tough, but she was hopeful, and above all, she had God. As she drove, Uzi whispered a prayer of gratitude. She knew now that nothing was worth risking her life and soul. This story urges us to be mindful of the choices we make, especially when they promise quick rewards. Some paths may lead to more than just regrets. They can drag one into darkness. True beauty and success come from within, and nothing is worth sacrificing your soul. Above all, never let anything or anyone make you feel less of yourself. If you enjoyed the story and would like to see more interesting stories, please consider subscribing to this channel, not forgetting to turn on your bell notification icon so that once a new video is being posted, you will be the first to be notified. You can also check out these videos here. I promise you won't be disappointed. Till we meet again in my next video, remain blessed.